Good afternoon, everyone.
Uh,
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. May I welcome Mr. Aleen Mukherjee, Senior Lead Special Project, Samsunati, New Delhi, India, and on the 2 days webinar on challenges and prospects in marketing of medicinal plants in India and supply chain management. At the outset, I really thank you very much, Mr. Mukherjee, for making some time namaskar, and for making some time for this initiative, which we are presently taking up with a sole intention of taking the views and opinion and suggestions of all the experts, industrial, personnel, and most importantly, those who are dealing with the medicinal plant sector or the supply chain management, so that we could come up with some recommendations which we will put forward to the ministry for their consideration. And with this attempt, we try to chalk it down with the help of some of our experts here in the form of a white paper. And obviously, we will be sharing with you all as well, because you are contributing in making this effort a success. And this sort of thing is very much needed for this particularly medicinal plant sector. The main reason is that it is totally unorganized as on today. Even the informations and everything is not very, I should not say it is exhaustive. That is better to say, but not only exhaustive, better in some of the cases, it's most of the guess that rather on data. So we are trying to get all those informations from the industry, from the different, even the farmers, different clusters, but all our effort is really I say it, momentous effort. It is becoming day by day. The reason being that it is totally unorganized. And the National Medicinal Plant Board, Ministry of Ayush, they are trying to do that, but since it is an unorganized sector and its prospect, people are really getting some idea that seeing after the COVID, that the important role the Ayurvedic medicines or the herbal medicines play, and people have understood also it is not always the going for a very targeted medicine. Instead of that, building up the immunity is also a very important factor to give a good fight against this sort of pandemic diseases. And that's why our effort is this, based on this. And I think he will be giving us a good input, highlighting different aspects that we should take into consideration. It might be even some regulatory reforms that we may be thinking at this point of time, so that we can draw the attention of the ministry. So these are basically is all this what we are trying to do. And with this, I rather request you to take up this matter and kindly give you suggestions in the form of your lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor and pleasure to be among the experts of medicinal and aromatic plants. You know, uh, as a backgrounder, I do not know if everybody is aware of it. Not. I'm basically a horticulturist and masters from Pandnagar University, and has been working in the agri business field for almost 27 years. So my discussion on this may overlap more than medicinal and aromatic plants and more to do with the structural aspects of any agricultural value chain and supply chain. And some might find resonance with everybody's understanding. Some might be a little bit new aspect, because when we talk about uh, uh, challenges and prospects of any agricultural supply chain, the structural aspects are more or less same. You know, when I say more or less same in the Indian context or South Asian context, because we are dealing with the first and foremost the production ecosystem, which is the smallholder economy, right? So that's why the structural issues in this scenario becomes a little bit more nuanced than when you talk about in countries where the agri supply chain is with much larger ecosystem, right? But of course, in some parts of Europe, for example, there are smaller farms and there are supply chain which works on. We will find commonalities. Now, when I do not have a presentation, so I will try to talk quite a bit, and then I think half an hour has been kept for discussions and any clarification. Uh, I'm going to mostly maybe articulate my experience rather than giving very pointed advice on nature in the agri supply chain. So, because the topic head starts with challenges and prospects in marketing of medicinal plants and this in India and supply chain management, but I would twist it a little bit and say prospects and challenges, right? So, if I take prospects as the first one, and as you rightly pointed out, that maybe COVID gave a huge nudge, but if I look at the potential and the prospects has been there all along within the Southeast Asian ecosystem. You know, I mean, from when I say Southeast Asia, even if China is a traditional medicine based, or Southeast Asia, Asia, and a humongous amount of traditional uh, mm, healing process or a nutritional process which is already there in place. So the question becomes, how does Indian eco supply chain or Indian farming community or Indian medicine and aromatic plant come into this ecosystem? The second aspect is that it's a pretty wide field, right? From when we talk about what I learned in my graduation and post graduation, you know, we used to go to CMAP in to have our field classes. The It's a pretty wide scale, right? Not only from the production, which is, but also from the forest collections. So it's a very wide ecosystem and much wider than a normal agricultural product. So prospects are definitely humongous, and definitely it needs to be nuanced as per the whatever you are maybe trying to get from the forest land and whatever has been grown. Secondly, whatever is in the nutritional standpoint, which we consume directly, and whatever we maybe inhale from the aromatic oil standpoint. Right? So that's also come under MAP if I consider that, because it's all part of medicinal and aromatic plant ecosystem. Now, if we talk about only the medicinal plants, I mean, of course, medicines can be of various nature from inhale to ingestion. So automatically, the approach has to be in the supply chain needs to be nuanced accordingly. So I think that differentiation might be also be needed from a regulatory structure if not already there. So the rules which govern citronella oil and the rules which govern your tulsi extract to be ingested has to be different and has to be treated differently. So uh, those are the, I mean, I'm jumping the gun here, as I said, but those are the aspects, the nuances which has to be taken into consideration. So prospects are definitely there. COVID has given a nudge, but one thing what we also have to realize is that consumers uh, has to have trust, right? So when a prescription is made from an allopathic medicine without, I mean, thinking twice, we take those. But in this kind of a condition, in case of a medicinal plant-based system, we try to question a lot, and it seems a lot of people, because our traditional knowledge comes into being, our parental or grandparental experience comes into the being. So we have to ensure that how do we standardize the uh, mm, standardize the dosage or whatever medically is required for building that trust. Uh, we have seen that there has been a huge amount of global interest. Turmeric is definitely one of the case study, but I'm sure there are other aspects, especially some of the medicinal seed ecosystem. Um, uh, I mean, the classic example is the Indian gooseberry or amla. If we talk about it, goes in our Ayurveda formulation. So so these kind of a production ecosystem, these kind of a market ecosystem, definitely has a huge amount of potential. The second prospect and potential which has come into being is the marketing challenges, right? So with the rise of e-commerce platform, I think the access to market has definitely gone up. Yes, it has its own challenges, but definitely it has gone up quite a bit. So the question becomes, how do we gain insight into how this e-commerce works, what are the rules and regulation, and how do we create trust among the consumer. uh, there are now a lot of emphasis because of the food system issue, a lot of emphasis on how good at agricultural practices, fair trade certifications, those things are also coming in play, and how those play a humongous amount of role to ensure the product quality and build trust going forward. Now, we more or less has established that yes, there is amount of there is a prospect. There are markets, from uh, if we take Jhandu Balm, or if we take your any of the Ayurvedic product or the Himalayan products, there are markets. They are selling, but there are also challenges in terms of quality standards. Can everybody make that kind of a quality standard product? So how do we ensure that the quality standards are maintained? How do we ensure there are enough recognizable brands of certifying entities who actually ensure that these are qualities are maintained? How are the regulations are that every nook and corner is not making something on their own home and selling it? That breaks trust, and building trust is one of the key challenge in building a market. And if we can't build a market, then it becomes very challenging to create a stable supply chain. The other aspect in the challenge part, it comes to the smallholders, and this smallholder challenge definitely is there in every supply chain. And so what it means is that a coalition has to happen. Now I will come to the coalition part a little bit later, that various models do exist, and whether such models can be studied, replicated within the medicinal plant supply chain or not. So the coalition is very, very important, because As already I think Dr. Ashish mentioned, that there are fragmented supply chain. So if it is a fragmented, so that means that needs to be collated at some level. So now the question becomes, at what point it can be collated easily where you can address these challenges. So, once you already collate, then definitely it becomes easier for the supply chain to be smoother. And once you have a smoother supply chain, the organizations or the private companies or the private levels who are involved in marketing these things becomes much easier. And if you top it up with regulatory aspects as well as the quality check aspect, it builds trust. And this basically brings in the market side of it, from the consumer trust side of it. The other challenge, which is a little bit tough to solve, but there could be innovative think process, is the price volatility in the marketplace, right? So, and that is something which needs to be really designed based on the crops, based on the pricing structure, whether we are exporting or whether we are domestically marketing those produce. So creating a price database of the medicinal plants, their derivatives, one can always back calculate because we have the last mile prices at a distributor level. And if you have the last mile prices at a distributor level, is it possible to bring it back and see that what could be the farmer's portion in that price and build the pricing accordingly? The database needs to be created, and it's not a one person's job, definitely, or one institution's. And that is again where I would see that government's interventions, Ministry of Ayush's intervention is definitely required to create this kind of a price mechanism, price information mechanism, not price mechanism, the price information mechanism, which is very, very important. Because this pricing mechanism, again, I will touch base upon on the production side of it in the supply chain aspect. So let's park the price aspect and the collation aspect for the second part of my discussion. So we have established that there are reasonable prospects in this particular industry, and especially there has been a recent nudge, and that nudge in terms of whether globally or domestically, people are moving towards a larger section of people that we have been as a community in the Asian belt has been more inclined towards this, but there I think there are more push now, and it's going to keep forward. I think Government of India is also pushing for example, natural farming or uh, so there would be a push. So how do we more channelize this in a better way? So I'm not going to be very worried about the prospect side of it. I think it's there. I think it's more to the supply side of it. And let's talk about then the supply part of it. So how do we get into the supply side of it? So what exactly the consumer wants, right? Consumer wants a particular product which is has been authenticated by a entity whom they can trust and can have a reasonable amount of traceability to take those medications or use those. I may not use the word medication, even if it is, let's say, government approved with such medication, then definitely yes, and use it with confidence on that. So for that, what is required is the traceability and transparency in the production ecosystem, right? So that becomes a very important aspect. So how do we create that traceability and transparency into the production ecosystem, whether it is origin issue, whether it is a treatment issue. uh, so those if the proper protocols are not there, that protocols needs to be in place uh, with due regulatory approval, right? similar to the pharma industry, right, where you have a well-established protocol to be in place. The this comes from before the product actually the raw material hits the factory. It's very important to build capacity of the farming community in the production ecosystem. So what it means is that the training and the capacity building initiative to for production ecosystem is very important. Now we all know in Indian situation, I think one of the biggest challenge has been extension, agri extension, right? And it actually transcends to any crop and that for that matter. So, focused approach of farmers trainings and farmer field schools. I mean, one of the approach which has been in existence for some time, but slowly withered away is the farmer field schools. And when we say farmer field schools, there are two aspects to it: the theory and the practical, right? And these could be the curriculum could be from a half a day to 7 days, but always attach with the practical, the demo aspects of it. So that is very important, and that is where I think the farmers will easier to build capacity of the farming community to showcase along with the theory. So farmer field school is one more recommendation which needs to be in place for ensuring sustainable production ecosystem by the farming community. This will again, and the reason I'm emphasizing on this because this will again uh, have confidence on the buyer side, right? So the raw material buyer side, and if there is a confidence of raw material buyer side, he can put in the traceability aspect. If he can put in the traceability aspect, he can be more confident or regulatory compliance. If it's a regulatory compliance confirmation, then it's easier for him to market the produce. So this aspect is very important to within the supply chain. uh, if there are questions in this, we can definitely respond to that at a later time. The second, the other aspect in this is, it has become, I mean, to my knowledge, to a large extent, these are niche products to a large extent, right? And because of the pricing and the competition and the way the private organizations work, I think we need to bring in the contract farming models here. And this contract farming models has to come in uh, by the private companies. Now, the question becomes why they are not coming in this ecosystem. Well, what are the challenges? That leads to again the traceability. I do not know what the farmer is going to do. I do not know what the price is. I do not know whether the farmers are going to give me the produce. uh, so all those aspects need to be looked into. In my experience, if the trust is on the both sides, it takes time to develop this trust, because I have dealt in contract farming model itself. It's my trust on my I have been a farmer in Africa, so when I doing contract farming, I have to trust my buyer, and that he will pay me in time. So how do we ensure that this kind of a relationship do exist on a continuous basis? And same thing with the farming community, that as a producer, I have to trust them and supply them what they want. So this relationship has to be built over a period of time. And we have examples in India where private companies and the farming community has worked together. And I mean, we know the crops. If you look at the potatoes, if you look at the gherkins, and I'm sure there are few even medicinal plants and aromatic plants which do work on contract farming model. There are organizations who are in the spice line. They're working on the, but they are working for the 15 years. So I think we need to encourage and see what are the learnings from there, and bring in wherever there is a gap. So I think we need to really bring in that. The other aspect is that, if you look at the government of India schemes in terms of infrastructure development, these crops require a little bit special treatment. I mean, if we, for example, do not have a proper cold store infrastructure in place, which are reasonably expensive, then the raw material deterioration would be much faster. So, can we treat them as a special, special rate of interest from the, because if it's a part of the industry, special rate of interest, such that the infrastructure of such nature can be built. It's again a chicken and egg situation. Private companies are not building, maybe because thinking ROI is too long, and there is not enough raw material because it has to travel from a little bit distance to the factory, and there is a deterioration. So, can for example, the way the Ministry of Food Processing has given scheme, can there be more schemes of such nature for these entities to take advantage, or the farmer producer organization to take advantage to build specific units, infrastructure required for these. So that is another aspect. The second, the other one is, we talked about pricing part of it. So I will re-emphasize that market intelligence and forecasting is one of the most important aspect for giving confidence to the buying private entities. So, how do we create that template, create that infrastructure, and create that MIS ecosystem where it is publicly available for the people to access and see in that field. Now, one of the aspect which we few of the questions which you have also raised in your consulting paper, I will pick up from there as well, is that whether the supply chain actually serves all the actors in the within the chain, right? So uh, and it is definitely serves the purpose, but the question is whether the its serving is fair over the whole supply chain or not. Are the farmers getting fair share? Are the intermediaries getting fair share? Are the buyer, ensuring that the product quality is right? So there are both aspects into this, and I think some of the uh, areas of supply chain, it will dissipate if we look into the contract farming model. We create more encouraging ecosystem such that the private companies who get into the contract farming model. So how do we get into the contract farming model into that? Uh, and where does the entities like you or government regulation can actually, or not regulation, maybe government schemes can actually help in terms of encouraging the private entities to get into the contract model, right? So there could be a price deficiency schemes available such that the farmers don't feel that if the prices go up or down, the contract gets reneged, or when the prices go up, the farmers renegade and don't supply to the supplier. So we need to see how policy level interventions can be made available to both the farming community as well as the private entity to navigate this issue. The other aspect which becomes the trading lobby. How do we ensure that the unscrupulous material doesn't get into the play? Do we have enough labs around to ensure this testings are done for the, especially for the medicinal aromatic plants? Do we have enough simple techniques, because some of the techniques to evaluate raw material could be expensive, which may not be affordable for everyone to do that within supply chain. But are there simple techniques available? Can there be any research based push to the scientific community and the research institutions to develop such smaller interventions, right? Where we ensure that yes, the basic necessities are quality norms are easily be maintained. So these infrastructure needs to be built. The question becomes who will build, third party or the private companies. Private companies definitely will have their own lab within their factory setup. Can there be a third party? Can there be institutions who can be designated? Can there be agriculture universities be funded to create such kind of labs within their ecosystem? Right? Can the good farmer producer organization be encouraged to set up where such a production ecosystem do exist, and how that can be supported through the schemes? And if the schemes not available, can they be schemes be developed through Ministry of Ayush with help of your expertise? So the infrastructure once becomes the important part, right? The other, important aspect becomes the risk part of it. We talked about the price volatility aspect, but there is also a risk of climate risk, which gives rise to the production risk. So the question becomes, how do we manage? Uh, Currently, hedging private risk is a price risk is not possible with these commodities, but maybe worth looking into whether hedging products or a derivative product can be explored, right? So that can be listed on the exchange for hedging requirement. The other more important aspect, I think we really need to look at the insurance sector, and how specific insurance products can be built around the crop loss or the productivity loss. And I just wanted to put across in the table is that recently what is happening, and globally it is quite popular now, in India also is getting popular. We really need to look at this aspect, is the parametric risk coverage. I think AIC India has launched one. It might be worth looking at the parametric insurance ecosystem and how that can be deployed within the farming community to the buyer module or the contract farming module. So maybe it's also worthwhile to create a model structure, which the private companies can look at and adapt. And entities like you can actually create that model structure, that okay, if you want to get into a contract farming, how do you take part of the production risk, how do you take part of the price risk, and how do you share the profitability part of it? So maybe brainstorming with various private companies and other experts, one can develop such kind of a model contract. Um, I always say it's more of a contact farming than the contract farming, but private companies definitely need to bring in more contact with their farming community as a partner. And because nowadays there are farmer producer organizations which are taking root and various parts of the country, so it might be worthwhile to bring in such farmer producer organization into the framework of contract farming. So instead of maybe the private company focusing on individual farmer, it can focus on one farmer producer organization to work on. So that will also bring in the confidence level, that will reduce the administrative expenses. And because it's an institution, you can bring in such kind of a novel product, right? As I said, the parametric insurance, which for example AIC has already launched, and how that can be built in within the contract model. So it safeguards the farming community on their price volatility and the climate risk and the product loss, because that is one of the major challenge from their end. and it also safeguards the buyer from the price fluctuations, right? So he also won't renegade his commitment to purchase that product. So I think these becomes very important aspect to ensure that there is a smooth supply chain, right? So the other, I mean, we talked about the, because the basic things, right? The technology adaptation, the capacity building aspects, of course, government side of it. But all these things which I would like to bring in is needs also funds, right? So funds, of course, we know are three kinds, right? The grant funds from the schemes, the debt funds from the government. Now we have AIF and other stuff, and then of course the debt funds from the formal ecosystem and NBFCs. And so that is where I think entities partnering with non-banking financial institutions also will help, which are more flexible in terms of rather than the formal banking channel. So bringing in the credit ecosystem also is important to within this supply chain, right? So so for example, I mean, I'm not marketing Samunnati per se. I'm saying there are products which is worked on trade finance. So look at the trade finance model to be built in a contract farming. So reason I'm saying the state finance route and emphasizing on the contract farming model is that I'm removing as much as risk possible from the transactions, right? So how do we mitigate the production risk? We mitigate the production risk through proper technology. We mitigate production risk through proper training. We mitigate risk through creating a farmer school ecosystem, extension services. We mitigate the price risk through crop yield loss, through crop insurance. We mitigate the price risk through maybe a hedging opportunity. We mitigate the price risk through maybe contract farming. We mitigate the fund requirement to run an operation through grant. We mitigate the price fund requirement through debt financing, and we mitigate the fund requirement through maybe trade financing. So the question becomes that how do we design this in a cohesive manner, which will ensure there is a smoother supply chain available. As soon as there is a smoother supply chain of raw material available, which includes the traceability, better quality product, the the confidence level of the buyer and the growing community becomes higher. And as the confidence level of the buyer goes up, he would be able to concentrate, I mean, the entity would be able to concentrate on ensuring a proper market placements. Because ultimately, consumer has to consume to ensure the supply chain works, right? So these would be at a macro level where we have to ensure this works. So maybe the bedrock would be to look at crop specific models to or maybe a group of crop specific models in terms of this contract farming models where it gives confidence to both the players, the production players, as well as the buyers and the buyers there. And we need to, and entities in between can maybe play a part role of, I won't say regulator, but maybe a facilitator. So entities like you can entities can plays a facilitating role in the initial phase to develop, right? And of course, there are government, central government, and I am not aware whether there are state entities, but definitely the central government entities can work on these areas, right? So. uh, So these are one of the few of the major areas within the to ensure that the supply chain of the medicinal and aromatic plants, the medicinal plants specifically, can be fine tuned. And my personal emphasis is definitely because it's a niche product. Uh, mm, a contact farming and a contract farming could be a much better route, but the question is there confidence enough today to build this symbiotic relationship between the grower and the buyer? And if not, then how the entities like RCFC at a pan-India level or a regional level can facilitate by developing these model framework, and also act as a mediator even with the regulatory environment, to ensure that the regulations are in favor of all the actors, including consumers. Uh, because this helps build trust, and no supply chain can be built for a longer duration without trust. I mean, of course, there are opportunistic businesses, opportunistic supply chain which works, but to build a long-term sustainable supply chain, I think a trust needs to be built in all these within the all these 3 points, I would say: the production, the unit which actually preparing this and marketing this, uh, and of course the consumer side of it, such that it becomes. So these are the basic structural aspects. I currently may not go into each individual aspect, that how much cold storage is required, or because I do not have the data currently, which is required for these kind of detailed aspects. But for example, if any medicinal plants which are leafy in nature and needs to be transported over maybe 50, 70, 100, 200 kilometers to the factory unit, do we have the other infrastructure in place to ensure the logistical infrastructure in place to ensure that the product moves smoothly without getting deteriorated over its journey? So so those infrastructure needs to be placed. The question becomes, who is going to put this infrastructure, because these are capex. So can we develop a viability gap funding model for such capex oriented investments, so that it attracts private players to come in and invest? A lot of times what we have seen within the supply chain is that because of the infrastructural problem in the grower level, the price difference is high, because the private company, because he doesn't want to develop a whole block or a district, right? Because his requirement could be small. uh, so automatically what happens, that the price transmission which happens from the market to the production area becomes very wide. Now, if we can nudge to create this infrastructural requirement through various schemes and viability gap funding, it will encourage the private companies or the local FPOs to build those infrastructure, right? Such that it becomes easier for the buyer to create a transparent or a traceable, auditable procurement ecosystem. If the raw material is coming in a reasonable reasonable channel, then automatically my production ecosystem becomes better. If my production ecosystem much better, then I'm in confident in terms of ensuring I'm complied with all the regulatory requirement to market my produce. Yeah. And that builds a confidence. Unlike many products, as we know, when it gets exported, because of MRL level or because of other things, uh, our export gets hammered, right? Uh, so such that and especially in these kind of products, it's very, very important because there are high value products. It's very, very important to ensure that this traceability and is maintained. And to maintain these are the infrastructure which needs to be in place. But the infrastructure needs high capex, and for that high capex, not many people wants to invest. So, can we create a financing model with debt and viability gap funding model where these infrastructure can be created? Then the question becomes, who is going to create this infrastructure such that they can run it profitably? Private companies or FPOs? Can there be model contract farming system can be created where they can be adapted by entities? Can the contract farming models include the price risk part, the parametric insurance part, the credit risk part within its own forum, such that it gives confidence to the farming community that the contract won't be reneged, or even the buyers don't default, or the sellers don't, or the farming community doesn't default. And we know that also happens. But we also have examples within the agri supply chain where this relationship has been going on with specific cropping system for almost now 15, 20 years without any much of a trouble. So maybe there are lessons to be learned that how those things have happened and how we can make it happen with the specific to this particular industry. So I know I have still have time, I guess, but I think I'm confident in terms of what I wanted to put forward to ensure that uh, what are the basic fundamental aspects which needs to be looked into if it not only exist, needs to come in first, right? Uh, on the prospect side, I don't have any doubt. So that is definitely there. But to get those prospects into a commercial ecosystem such that the whole supply chain gets benefited, we need to look at the structural aspects, because ultimately the product has to be manufactured and marketed by private companies. I'm sure we are not talking about PSUs or the government entities doing that, right? So the regulations to ensure that it builds trust in the last mile, which is consumers like us, because even if we go to any pharmaceutical shop or anywhere, we ask 10 questions, I mean, how good it is, right? So the brand building doesn't happen easily, unlike in allopathic medication where brand not necessarily matters much, right? I mean, whatever a doctor has prescribed, it goes through. So there is a regulatory procedure. What happens at the back, we are not going to delve into that, but there is a regulatory procedure. People are reasonably confident. Doctor have written a prescription. You go to a pharmacy and buy. Is there a trust within this medicinal plants ecosystem to have that kind of 3 year, 5 year, 10 year down the line? So how do we build that where you just go and purchase? Right, there's a consistency. Of course, people are still buying it, but there are also a lot of negative connotation which needs to be removed, and that has to come from this confidence and trust building, and not only from the consumer standpoint, from the consumer to the seller, seller to the factory, factory to the production ecosystem, right? And to do that, we need to have reasonable amount of traceability, we need to have infrastructure in place, and to do that, we need finance and the regulations in place. And we need the training ecosystem through the, for example, as I mentioned, through the farmer school, farmers field school ecosystem kind of a model to ensure that this. And it needs contact for a longer duration with the growing community. So how do we create that constant touch with the growing community for and again there are products, for example, vetiver, which goes in for 3 4 years 5 years into the field, right? You crop and you use, you crop and you use. And so all models may not suit all crops, all medicinal plants, right? So we need to see how crop specific models also can be developed, or the supply chain or the traceability for those particular crops can be developed. So, I mean, to give an anecdotal example, if we talk about ossimum species, I mean, there are 5, 6 ossimum species which are out there. So, is there any minimum oil content which is required to be in the regulatory forum, right? I mean, for example, if you buy mustard seeds for oil, the market decides price on moisture and oil content. Is there any standard within the medicinal plants of such nature? How does the price gets determined? Right? What are the quality parameters? Such that the farming community also knows if my production ecosystem is delivering such requirements in the chemical formulations, and I can get it easily tested through help of maybe FPOs or entities or government labs, then I'm confident of what my pricing could be. And that gives confidence for him to grow that produce and getting a reasonable return. So these are the aspects which we really need to look at, and this is definitely the pricing mechanism or the pricing aspects. I'm sure we need government intervention in create a database, uh, and how the price gets determined if it is not already done. I give you an example of mustard, and there are many such examples within the agri value chain where uh, prices are, when we say quality, what exactly it means in terms of quality, and depending upon its mm, usage, the quality the market has already determined that minimum requirements for its economic importance. So I think if it's not there, we really need to create these points, and that definitely will help our farming community to have confidence. So I think we'll take a pause, stop here, and
Uh,
if there are
thank
any.
thank you, Mr. Mukherjee, for your wonderful deliberations. But I have failed in one aspect that I should introduce you at the start. So I would want to rectify my fault, kindly allow me. In a career of spanning 25 years across the countries, including India, West and East Africa, Mr. Aleen Mukherjee has donned multiple hats, including as a development professional, roles in the private sector, as an entrepreneur also, and skill in farm gate procurement, which is very, very important, and export market across domestic and international border, have deep understanding of agricultural production system for various commercial crop cultivation, from conceptualization, design and execution with focus on market-based solutions, gained knowledge on agriculture market ecosystem, efficient and transparent market design and development, and understanding of broad agriculture economics or agroeconomics impacting trade and policy issues. Served significant leadership roles with organizations such as Windrock International, Tata Farms, and USAID, and has consulted for agencies like FAO, UNCTAD, and KPMG. Also specializes in developing implementation plans for large-scale projects and building agricultural supply chains, back-end integration, and connecting farmers to export and forward markets. He holds a master's degree in horticulture from GB Pant University of Agriculture and Technology in India. He advanced certificates for in food safety and trade from the World Bank, and in strategic thinking and leadership for growth from the Wharton School. So it's really a wonderful, experience, particularly in the field where we need obviously the suggestions, your well thought experience and well thought, the future plan should be in the, and the agroeconomics particularly involved with our this medicinal plant sector. Here you have mentioned a lot of things and people will raise certain issues, but I rather uh, will seek a help from you, particularly in the regards of uh, parametric insurance, which is very, very important. Now, as you see that it is in a, still it is a very much in an organized sector. What I feel, the first confidence is that there is really too much of market dependence, that it's a lot of changes in the prices that happens. It's true, and whether since it is an unorganized sector, it is happening more and more. So what is the problem here, as I find, is that here the worst sufferer is our farmers, and obviously we cannot start the process without the farmers, because that is the initial point and that is the main growth. Because if there is no cultivation, there is no question of the development of this medicinal sector in any way. Through collection is not possible. So that's why I would like to say, yes, collection is 100% was one point of time. It has been reduced and reduced. Now, obviously, still we have a 70% dependency or more with the collection, wild collection of medicinal plants, and but we since we government also is very much inclined for the promotion of medicinal plant cultivation. So if you can give us a model, because you have an experience of that, particularly what should be in our proposal to the for the framework, policy framework, in the sense that how this insurance, parametric insurance, could be designed for this particular sector of medicinal plant. Because since you have a lot of agroeconomics, already you have developed certain models, as I find in your biodata. So why don't you give some light how we can really should approach, because government is ready at this moment, initial, that we should give some support. So only we have to chalk down the path based on the experienced people like you, who have the idea about this in a, might be in a agricultural sector, might be with other crops, level crops or commercial crops.
Yeah. So
Please let us.
can I respond quickly on,
Yeah, please,
on
please.
this? Of course, so there are a couple of things. As I said, AIC already have a parametric insurance coverage. So maybe that is the first point of discussion with them to understand. But to supplement that, which I also mentioned, if the database on the production, productivity, and the previous prices are not there, it becomes a little bit tough journey. And I also mentioned that maybe will the government and the private entities help, that MIS database of price points is very, very important at the farm level price points. And if we don't have the farm level price points, is it possible to look at the aggregated price points and derive from there? Because the insurance companies, even the parametric, because the index based insurance, they would definitely like to know the price differentials to develop such. The good part is that in terms of production loss coverage, uh, to a large extent, it will it look at the temperature leaf index and such areas, right? And in today's technology, these a lot of these data points may not be very difficult to get. It may be expensive, NDVI data from all the satellite imagery entities, or maybe the government of India, if they are not, can do. So that could be a starting point, that what kind of data points are available. And second, of course, the entities who have already created such brochures, of parametric insurance in the Indian agricultural context? Can that be adapted for medicinal plants or not? So an insurance or an actuarial team would be better able to respond and design in that.
Because as I understand that if that can be really coupled with the, the commercial, or which we call the contract farming rather. So if that could be coupled, and a government, first of all, medicinal plant cultivation cannot be covered that way. The agricultural insurance is there already. So there should be first of all, there must be a regulatory changes to be made that insurance should be available for this medicinal plants that should be treated.
So in
Yeah.
in the context of parametric aspect, so one of the easier thing is that because they will look into certain data points which impacts everything, right? It's agnostic to what crop is being grown. The only thing what it will require is that how much loss coverage it has to give. To do that loss coverage part, the past data of production productivity would be, and the value would be required. So that is where you might find some challenges, and that's why I said maybe it's worth talking to entities like AIC, who has already created such model for other crops, and they would be able to provide you in a more structured manner that okay, these are the data points. So if the government of India has those data points in certain crops, maybe that could be a good starting point. I do not know whether you require a deviation in terms of regulation ki medicinal plants you require a separate crop insurance or not. So I don't think it required. I mean, the only thing it might be required if the premium is high, maybe a subsidizing premium model could be looked into.
That's good. No, I also do not have that idea that without that, as you are telling now, the parametric insurance, that might be taking up the risk factor in other way, not really depending on the crop itself, but rather okay, that information I do not have. I really would like to know who is the ATU you have referred, na? AIC. AIC, who are doing this about the insurance?
Agriculture Insurance Company of India, the Government of India company.
So so we can approach the ministry. They can also help in really chop down this.
Yeah.
Thank you. That could be of really important. I think we have also two persons is very important here who will raise you the certain questions. One is Madam Shoma Chakraborty. She will be asking you because she is drafting the thing on behalf of us, taking all the points into view, So she might be asking, but before that, I would rather request Shantanu Chakraborty sir. Please, he has certain questions, he has certain aspects also. He's also behind this, one of the important person behind this sort of thoughts and this sort of exercises rather. So I request Shantanu Chakraborty, if you kindly raise the issues out of his lectures as well as on which aspects Mr. Aleen Mukherjee could throw some light. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Majumdar. And thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. It's a really very exhaustive and enlightening deliberation from your end. But I have few points just to mention. Those are not actually questions, but some observations. First of all, you decided about the problem, you discussed about the problem regarding small holdings, and you recommended that coalition may be the best way to take care of that. And in this regard, I feel that FPO and farmers cooperatives are the correct bodies for this type of coalitions, but they are also suffering with their own issues. And according to our observation, These FPOs and farmers cooperatives, which are pretty grassroots level organizations, they do not have the required market intelligence. They do not have a management acumen, and there are cultural issues also. And that makes the entire ecosystem not robust and often causes suboptimal performance from these organizations. And apart from that, we have discussed about the modalities of the contract farmings, what can be the best way of coming up with a structure for that. But a lot of commerce of medicinal plant happens outside of the contract farming ecosystem. And in our few last discussions, what we actually witnessed, specifically the medium and small industries are very much reluctant to enter into contract farming systems because they do not want to share even the minutest of the risks. So we need to accept that this traditional supply chain through intermediaries will stay, but it has a very unique problem. That is revenue security for the farmers. Farmers often are compelled to sell their product on credit, and it passes through several intermediaries and reaches to the final consumer, and then the resources trickle down from there to the farmer, and it takes sometimes a long time, and sometimes there is no predictability also. So I believe that we need to come up with a solution for that, and the risk sharing in this entire ecosystem is very asymmetric. All the risks are piled up on the farmers, and all the stakeholders actually bear no risk at all. But here the risk is not related to crop performance. Even with a good crop performance, there is no guarantee of revenue. So we need to come up with a system which can take care of that. And regarding contract farming, as Professor Majumdar has pointed out, that we need to come up with a proper framework of contract farming, a proper SOP for executing a contract farming agreement. And as you have rightly pointed out, that what may be the outcome of the price fluctuation. If the price goes up, then always the farmers are very much reluctant to honor the contract, and if price goes down, then the reluctance will be from the industry side. So we need to come up with the proper modalities of an SOP for that. But there is also another aspect of disagreement in this system regarding the procurement price. There is no modalities to fix a practical procurement price. Sometimes the farmers are paid only what the industry wants to pay, and that is often determined by their product cost. And since the market is very much competitive for them, so they want to pass on the price advantage to their consumers, and they often try to reduce the raw material cost, and that actually often results into a procurement price from their sides which doesn't have any link to the production cost at all. And that is often a very prominent challenge for sustainability of the farming sector here. We are trying our level best to promote medicinal plants farming among our farmer, but it is not getting sustainable there. After 2 or 3 cropping seasons, farmers are quickly losing interest in this because of this unsustainable pricing. So we need to take care of that as well, what we believe, and we would very much like to have your opinion on these few issues.
Okay, there is no perfect world, right? So these issues exist in all supply chain, and which you rightly pointed out. I personally also have faced this issue when I was doing the contract farm. So that's why I think initially I raised few points that within the supply chain, it's very important that transparency and traceability is there. So, from a smallholder standpoint, it's very, very difficult for individual farmers to ensure that this, the terms of the trades are equal, because he may not be even able to understand the terms of the trade, right? So, is it possible to mediate, facilitator entity, whether through coalition model, whether through SAG model, whether through FPO model? So that needs to be looked into, and it varies, right? So whether through cooperative model, so that will bring in some amount of understanding on the terms of the trade part of it. I fully agree with all the issues which you have raised, and that's the reason I also mentioned that understanding the price database, which I do not know whether it exists or not, the price transparency will come from that. If it is not there, it needs to be built. It needs to be prepared. The other thing also I had mentioned is that the framework for a contract farming involving three aspects, the three risk which comes in: the production risk, the price risk, and the default risk, right? So how do we build in within the contract through the regulatory channel in the contract design these three aspects? To mitigate the price risk and the production loss risk, I talked about the either hedging possibility, which is maybe a little bit on the lower side of it in terms of whether it can be developed and it takes longer time, but definitely the insurance aspect, which definitely can be explored very easily and quickly. The other aspect is on the default default side, and that is where I brought in the trade financing model, right? So that the as soon as the product gets moved from the production ecosystem, the farmer gets paid. So there are models which are coming up, and that is where I said we as an also entity can help in look at that model, because that's the model which works in many of these agricultural supply chain as well. And those are crop agnostic models. Those are more commercial ecosystem models. So I think we as a everybody who is involving in such needs to look at look at that. I definitely agree with you. As I said, I first of all these problems are there in any supply chain, whether it's agri, whether it's MAP or medicinal plants. These problems are there, but there are also uh, positive aspects in this supply chain which needs to be looked into. I can give you many examples, which can be like how it happened, why that particular supply chain is working, you know what happens to the, let's say we are in you are in West Bengal, why Pepsi and potato contract farming model is working, why in Bangalore gherkin model is working, why in seed production contract farming model is working. So let's pick up the good ones. Let's pick up the learnings from these and maybe tweak the SOP as you have mentioned, so that it gives confidence to the buyer as well as to the other main aspect, which is it's a very big economic issue. That I do not know whether any contract farming model can solve or any other model can solve. It's the simply per unit return from the farmer's point of view, to switch to crop which may not be as payable as which is already growing, right? And especially if there is no assured market, it's very, very difficult. So the economics need to be really looked into from pure per unit return point of view from the farmer's angle. Today, if he's growing X and he's getting 100 rupees, is introducing other crops and medicinal plants without spending more resources, is still making 100 or more. And that's why what we see in the agri ecosystem is that changing crop by the farming community is one of the toughest thing to do. So maybe a little bit more study on each unit, whichever is the geographical area you're going to focus on, also needs to be looked into, in terms of crop replacement. But in terms of the other aspects of price risk, default risk, credit risk, I think that can be solved through a proper SOP. And talking to insurance companies, as I gave example, already there are parametric insurance which is coming to the place. So I will pause here.
Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. I have just another curiosity that you said that there may be processes for ensuring farmer's payment as soon as he transfer ownership of the raw material. And I believe that you are directly working in this sector. Could you please give us a little bit more details about that, how that system works?
I think in one of the webinars earlier, I gave a presentation to about the entity which I represent, Samunnati. So there is a model of trade financing. It's called bill to ship to, where these models exist, and the buyer basically farmers need not to worry about buyers, or the supplier need not to worry about buyer paying them. So this model, in this model, what happens, Samunnati ensures that the payment is credited to the seller's account in a much faster fashion, and any default or anything, that risk gets transferred to Samunnati, between Samunnati and the buyer. So it is what we call BTST, a bill to ship to model.
Okay. So thank you very much. I do not have any other point to mention over here. So over to you, Professor Majumdar.
Madam Shoma Chakraborty, please. Madam Shoma Chakraborty, do you have any question?
In the meantime, I will ask one question
Please. Mr. Sudipto Ghosh, yeah.
Mr. Mukherjee, that since you have worked with the international trade in agri systems, so what is the volume that you think that can easily pass into a regulatory framework for walking into, and maybe possibly into indexes like NCDS and all those things?
No, I didn't get the second part of the question. If the first part is, if I understood, what is the volume?
That might help any crop to get listed into kind of NCDS.
Okay, yeah. So each product has its own SEBI approval process. So the first point could be that just look at, they have 135 products listed, as approved. So that could be maybe the first check. If the product is not listed, then it would be difficult. It has to go through another route. I mean, for example, recently I was reading in the news, though I have left the market, they have approved egg and some other new products which was not there. So there is a process. First, look at the 135 or 150 odd products which are already there, and then look at, you have to make a case that, okay, uh, volume in terms of, because value keeps on changing, but I think the quantum and the supply chain. So if I, for example, if I look at ashwagandha, right, and it's widely grown. Hmm. Now, ashwagandha, how much derivatives can it be created, right? And what is the value? So, value, of course, will keep on changing if the wide enough volume and wide enough production ecosystem, then it's easier. Or if we take, let's say, I'm just giving an example, aloe vera, right? And so that could be one of the volume issue, but more in addition to the volume, there are other aspects, right? The stability of the product also is very, very important in the futures market. But it's a little bit of study. We have guar and guar gum, which has only grown in Rajasthan and still being traded on the exchange platform.
Exactly.
Can I put my question, sir?
Please.
Thank you. Sir, taking the cues from your discourse and Professor Majumdar's and then Mr. Shantanu Chakravarti told that industries are normally very sensitive to share the data while database creation is important. I need to ask you, what can be the roles of the private industries in building up a database infrastructure to aid the government in the test labs? This is my one question. I have two other questions too.
What do you mean by test labs?
The quality labs.
Okay. So there are two parts of the question, if I understand. One is the data point, whether private industry will share the data points or not.
Yes.
And I understand the second part is test labs, whether private company will set up or not.
No,
No, sorry.
whether they will share their data. Whether they
So
will share their data
no,
and what can be the roles.
Generally they won't, if it's all commercial in nature, unless and until it is mandated, right?
Yes.
That is where the regulation system comes in, because if it is as I said, within the medicinal plants, either it's ingested or inhaled, right? And we have certain guidelines from the allopathic side where these regulations are very strictly monitored.
Actually,
So,
yes, sir.
so
Actually,
yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead.
actually, why I said this, that can there be a benchmarking of allowing yields to be used in medicinal industry, like after certain testing the traceability and the contamination? If a product is found that it is not adhering to certain standards, it can go for personal consumption, not to be used in the medicinal industry. So can there be? I mean, this way it can really help the
I
industry.
I am not a nutritionist or a regulatory person, so I don't think I would be able to respond to this one. But I am a more of a market and a supply chain person, so that's why I said the data points are very, very important in terms of its the production and the pricing data points, because one of the supply chain consistency is also the price point of the farmers to grow. It would be the role of the regulator and the the ministry, I think, to come up with specific chemical compositions aspects. So I don't think I'm qualified to respond to that.
Okay. Sir, you raised a very good point on training of the farmers. So, how far technology can assist in the framing of farmers' training? For example, can there be some LMS systems in regional languages, or is it necessary for personal communication?
Uh, See, I believe I am old school in this, and farming is a physical work.
Okay.
One need to have a system. You can have all the technology in one end, but you need to have on ground teaching capabilities.
Okay.
That
Thank
is a
you.
must.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Majumdar and Mr. Chakravarti.
Thank you. Let me again, not only thanks, but a very sincere thanks from the core of my heart to Mr. Aleen Mukherjee for accepting our invitation and delivering the lecture, which has highlighted the many points. Actually, we might be even will be rather taking this liberty to disturb you in getting certain model which we will be sharing with the ministry in the development of that based on your lectures and others' lectures. We will make something and for which again we may seek some of your expert comment on that or some suggestions or modifications that also we may seek for. And I think you are being a very nice person and a very experienced person will help us to take this. I think it's a national cause to do something for farming community. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. And at the onset, I should have also mentioned sincere apologies for the confusion on 4th. And thanks to my good friend Shudipto that he accepted, and that day suddenly there is a meeting came up
Right.
with the ministry.
And we
So
are also
sincere
happy that
apologies.
we managed, other speaker. He agreed.
I-
Obviously, I must give him the credit because Mr. Ghosh took that pain of getting him
Yes,
available, so that actually, as such, our session is concerned, this effort is concerned, almost it remains. I think that is also very good because you have sincerely busy with that, and that's why. The Almighty has managed everything and it has run very nicely. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you very much.
Mukherjee.
Thank you.
And obviously, we will be in touch with you, particularly on this aspect, and hoping in future on many aspect of medicinal plant development, we will seek your cooperation. Thank you very much for the time being. Namaskar.
Namaskar.